Hey, what is up, YouTube? It is the Dual Threat Podcast here. Happy Halloween. We're going to talk about what our top 10 after this week are. As you can see, BYU is still going on. So take that in mind when we say our top 10s. Western Kentucky might upset them, and we wouldn't know about it until after this video has been shot. If you haven't already, please subscribe. As you can see, a lot of people aren't subscribed, so please do. It would help us out tremendously. So we don't know each other's top 10, and we're just going to go ahead and talk about it. So, Jake, you want to go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, so my number one team, I have Alabama this week. They showed up against Mississippi State. They looked great, and Mac Jones just led that offense really well. The defense showed up. They put up a big goose egg against that high-powered Mississippi State offense that hasn't looked so high-powered since they put up all those points against LSU. Yeah, so I've got Alabama as my number one. Who do you have, Drew?
I'm going to agree with you on that. I think Alabama has always been a red hot team. I think they've been on fire recently, and I think they've been itching towards that number one spot, and they've been pretty deserving of it, except for Clemson's just been just as good as them, if not better, until today. And I know a lot of that had to do with Trevor Lawrence being out due to COVID, but I don't think the defense looked very good against Boston College either. And so that's my reason to bump up Alabama. And going back to Clemson, that's my number two team. Even though they did keep it close with Boston College, and we'll talk about it in another video, but I think Boston College should have won that game. But you can't really punish them too much because of Trevor Lawrence not being there, so that's why I dropped them to number two.
Yeah, absolutely. That's who I have as my number two as well. DJ Uwangulale, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
He actually looked pretty good in that game, I thought. He didn't make a lot of mistakes. He seemed to run the offense pretty well. It seemed like it was Clemson's defense that kind of stumbled today against Boston College. That's why I dropped them to number two. They have that big game against Notre Dame coming up next week. Trevor Lawrence is not going to be playing in it, so we're going to get to see DJ again in that game. Yeah, so I have Clemson as my number two team. And number three for me, I've got Ohio State. They looked pretty dominant against Penn State. There's not much more to say about that. I mean, they barely covered the line, but they did cover the line. Vegas had it pretty nailed.
As they do about most games.
Yep. And I mean, Justin Fields he's looked like a Heisman quarterback so far this season. But who do you have as number three, Drew?
I've got the same ones. I mean, we've talked about this before, but really the 1, 2, and 3 spots are pretty solid. And not usually interchangeable like they are this week due to Trevor Lawrence not being there. But it's really 4 through 10 that differ in the top 10.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where I'm going to go to my number 4. And as much as it hurts me, I'm going to put Notre Dame at number 4.
Mm-hmm.
I think they looked pretty good tonight. They definitely looked a lot better last week. And so you can't really punish them for dominating teams. So I'm going to leave them at number 4. What do you got?
Yeah, I also have Notre Dame at number 4. I mean, a 31-13 win over Georgia Tech was pretty convincing. Ian Book looked better than he has in the past few weeks.
For sure.
It's frustrating to put this team there. I don't think that they're that good. I think Clemson will beat them, even with DJ back there at quarterback, even though it's going to be at Notre Dame. But I do have them as number 4 because there's just not a lot of teams to put at number 4 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I believe that we're going to start having some variance right here. I personally have Cincinnati as number 5. A 49-10 win over a Memphis team who beat UCF, but UCF doesn't seem that legit this year. I value that pretty high. I also watched Cincinnati dismantle SMU last week, who came out and hung over 50 against Navy today. That is why I have Cincinnati as my number 5 team. Who do you have, Drew?
Well, I'm going to stick with Georgia at number 5. I think their defense was dominant today, as we've known for a long time. Kentucky's not the best offense, but they do have a good defense. And this is where I struggle to put Georgia at number 5, but I think I'm going to stay there. Their offense has been struggling. I mean, they scored on the first drive, and they scored one more time after that for the entire game. They really need to work that out as the week goes, especially when they play Florida this week with a dominant offense, which we'll talk about later.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about how Kentucky has a good defense. Florida does not. So that's really going to change a lot. Next week, I think Georgia's offense is going to be a little bit better, but I really can't drop them after the defensive game they had today.
Yeah.
And at number 6, I have Texas A&M. I think a lot of people are going to look at that Arkansas game and say that it was kind of close because they look at the score. But if you really watch that game, I think A&M destroyed Arkansas and then ran the ball the whole fourth quarter and didn't score at all. And that's when you saw Arkansas score. I think it was 14 or 21 straight.
Yeah.
And so that makes it look a lot closer because Jimbo Fisher doesn't like to run up the score. I don't know why, but and so a lot of people were doubting Texas A&M. A lot of people picked Arkansas to upset, and I think A&M delivered, especially Kellen Mond. He looked fantastic tonight.
Yeah.
And so, who do you got?
I actually also have Texas A&M as number 6. I thought Kellen Mond looked great against Arkansas tonight. Yeah, like you said, that score doesn't reflect what the game actually played like. I mean, it was 42-17. And A&M was just completely dominating the game, and then they took the foot off the gas, and Arkansas put up some more points to make it 42-31. But Kellen Mond was just dropping dimes tonight. Isaiah Spiller was having a good game. Anais Smith had a great game. I mean, this A&M offense just looks great. The A&M offensive line, the Maroon Goons, as the SEC Network likes to say. They looked great tonight. I mean, A&M just looks like a really complete team right now, with that one blemish coming against Alabama, who, I mean, you and I both have them as number 1. I think if they were to play Alabama again today, I think that it would be a much closer game. I still think Alabama would come out on top.
I agree.
But yeah, that's why I have A&M at number 6. And following that, number 7, that is where I have Georgia, because that offense looks horrible.
Yes, it does.
Their defense is fantastic, but in college football, defense does not win championships anymore.
Very true.
It seems like offenses are really taking over right now in college football.
Especially elite offenses, and
yeah.
that's what you find in Alabama and Clemson.
Yeah, and even in Ohio State.
Right.
And I feel like Georgia's offense, led by Stetson Bennett, it's just not up to par with those other elite teams. I think this next weekend's game against Florida is really going to show whether or not Georgia's a legit team. They don't really have any big wins yet this season. I mean, that win against Tennessee and the win against Auburn looked good at the time, but neither of those teams are ranked anymore. And yeah, Auburn had a great game against LSU this week, but that's LSU, and we've seen how many issues they've had so far this season. So who do you have as number 7?
I actually have Cincinnati here. I'm really hesitant to move them strictly because I feel like they haven't really played anybody and proved themselves. As I've said before, and I will continue to say unless I'm proven otherwise by them playing at least a decent team, I believe this is the UCF of 2018. I would really be disappointed if they were to be put in the playoffs over another Power 5 team. I just feel like if you want to make the playoffs, then you need to play better teams. And it's hard because it's not Cincinnati's fault that they play bad teams. It's just the hand they were dealt with. And, UCF has a case for 2018. They did end up beating Auburn, but it wouldn't make any sense to me to put them in the playoffs without playing anybody.
But do you see Cincinnati losing a game this year, though?
I really don't. And that's what's
what would it take?
hard.
What would it take for Cincinnati to be in the playoff? Like, what would you need to see to say, okay, that team does deserve to be one of the top 4 teams? I
really can't tell you. I mean, there's nothing that they've done to say that they're a bad team. I mean, they've just beat everybody by a lot. It's hard to say that they're a bad team because they're obviously not. They just beat bad teams, and that's why it's hard for me. I mean, they're not going to play a single ranked team. I mean, they played SMU, who turns out to actually be okay, as we saw today.
But SMU hasn't played anyone either. So
and that's what's hard with me. So I'm going to keep Cincinnati at 7. I really don't see moving them up a whole lot the rest of the year unless people above them start losing, and even then I might have people jump them. And this is where I might might differ from you. I have Florida at number 8. I feel like they were dominant against Missouri, and I think a lot of people expected them to be dominant against Missouri this year, except for the fact that they're coming off of not playing for 3 weeks and still being dominant. The defense did not look terrible. They definitely improved from what we've seen before. But what was really shocking is how Kyle Trask did not skip a beat. He looked like he had been playing every week. He's still my personal favorite for the Heisman, but that's obviously biased because I've had him being my Heisman this entire year. And so who do you've got at number 8?
I actually also have Florida at number 8. I thought that the Florida defense specifically was really able to shut down Connor Bazelak and Missouri's offense. Missouri got a late touchdown to make it 41-17. The Florida offense has looked great all year. They continued to look great against Missouri. I was very impressed by that defense, though. I was not expecting them to really be able to stop the Missouri offense as much as they did. I thought Missouri might put up 30 on them this week. I did think Florida was going to win, but I didn't think it was going to be this convincing. I feel like that Florida-Georgia game is going to be a lot. It's going to show us a lot about both of these teams. Right now, I think I would definitely lean towards Florida, just given how bad Georgia's offense looked today against Kentucky.
Right.
But I have Florida at number 8 right now. And number 9, I have Wisconsin. I didn't want to punish them for having 22 of their players get COVID.
Correct.
And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the Big Ten deals with this, because they have an 8-game schedule set for 8 weeks, and they don't let players come back for 21 days. And I think it's safe to assume Wisconsin's game next week will also be postponed or canceled. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Might have to drop Wisconsin out of those rankings if they continue to not play. But right now I've got Wisconsin at number 9. I mean, they looked very dominant against Illinois last week, so I felt like I should just leave them there.
See, I also have Wisconsin at number 9, and you just touched up on basically everything I was going to say. So using my time, I'm going to ask you, if Wisconsin has to sit out for the next 2 weeks due to COVID, and then they end up winning out and beating Ohio State, do you put them in the playoffs at 6-0 or 5-0?
Jeez. I don't think that that's a big enough sample size to deserve a playoff spot. It's kind of how I feel about the Pac-12. I think that a perfect Pac-12 team that goes 6-0, say Oregon goes undefeated, goes 6-0, I do not believe that team deserves to be in the playoff over a team like A&M who might be 9-1. That's tough to say, though, because if Wisconsin does go undefeated and has a big win over a team like Ohio State, that's more deserving than a Pac-12 team. I think that the Big Ten... I'm sorry?
I just said absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I think that it's going to be tough to say. I'm interested to see how the college football playoff navigates these teams playing different amounts of games, and if they're going to penalize teams for playing more games but having a loss. I don't know how you value 6-0 versus 9-1 or something like that. I mean, if Wisconsin beats Ohio State, I do think that they have a very solid case for having a spot in the playoff.
And that's where I'm going to agree with you there. I think if Wisconsin were to win out, I mean, if you look at the games that they would be missing, obviously this weekend, and then you've got Purdue, and then they would come back, and I believe their first game would be against Michigan, which just looked terrible today against Michigan State. And then if you look at the rest of their schedule, their only ranked team would be Indiana. And so it's kind of hard to say those wins would really value anything. But when you get to playing Ohio State, and if you were to beat them, I think that would be their strongest case.
Yeah.
It would be really hard to determine whether you would put them in or not.
Yeah, for sure. So who do you have at number 10, Drew?
Well, I've got, as long as they don't get upset, I've got BYU.
Mm-hmm.
They're an undefeated team, sort of like Cincinnati, haven't really played anybody. And so, especially with the way teams have been this year, getting upset by people they shouldn't have, and all that kind of stuff, a lot of those kind of teams that are beating bad teams and going undefeated are showing up in the top 10. And so that's where I'm going to place BYU.
Yeah, I also have BYU at number 10. There's just no one else to put there.
Yeah.
I mean, BYU is taking care of business right now against Western Kentucky. We had it on in the back. It's at halftime right now. But I mean, there's no one else around. I mean, maybe you could put Oklahoma State there.
That's what I was going to say. If BYU were to lose this game, or maybe even not lose the game, I think maybe you put Oklahoma State there. As you saw by our video yesterday with our picks, we did pick Texas to win that game.
Yes.
So that's not as big of a shocker as to us as it is to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't mind if the AP poll were to place Oklahoma State still in the top 10, but yeah, that's where I'm putting BYU as well.
Yeah. And so I know that we're just doing our top 10, but I do have one question for you. Who would be your 11th team that has played so far? Because I feel like Oregon probably will be that team. But I genuinely have no idea who the next best team is in college football.
So are you saying if
taking Oklahoma State out of it and taking the Pac-12 out because they have not played a game yet, who would who is on the verge of being in the top 10?
Well, like I said, I think Oklahoma State would be there, but if we're talking about if BYU were to lose and Oklahoma State not being in there,
yes,
I really can't tell you. I really can't. It's just so hard this year. I guess Miami. I mean, they are number 12.
Yeah.
And they haven't looked great, I guess. But I mean, they're next up. So
yeah, I mean that
it would either be Miami or Oregon. I mean, North Carolina losing today.
Yeah, Michigan lost at number 13. North Carolina lost at 15. Kansas State lost at 16.
There's that 11 to
maybe
15
Indiana?
range is really just gone in the drain, and now there's going to be a lot of new ranked teams. And so I'm looking forward to the AP poll tomorrow and seeing how all it changes for sure.
I mean, the Coastal Carolina, man, they might be climbing up in the rankings. The Chants, baby.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the AP poll tomorrow is going to be it's going to be interesting. That's for sure.
Absolutely, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have anything you want to say or ask?
No, I don't think so. I think that's going to be it from us.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching. As always, if you ever have a differing opinion, please comment down below. And this has been the Dual Threat Podcast. Please follow us on Twitter. Happy Halloween. Please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.